And we are recording. Welcome everybody. Today is July 15th, 2019, and this is the bi-weekly Cluster API Provider vSphere syncup call. We are going to have a light agenda today since we have Andrew that is out, Andrew Cutts. He asked to just take a look at some of the items that we have in the backlog and maybe see if we can get some agreement on, especially the ESX code that was recently pulled from 030, and see if we can get something back in. I'm going to start and look at the 031 milestone that Andrew has created. I think we have a bunch of items here that are up for grabs right now. And I haven't looked at the backlog for some time, but it looks like we have some issues here around testing and conformance for the target cluster that is getting deployed. I see there's a help wanted here, and I see there's some comments from Moshe. Do you have anything you want to add some context to this one, Moshe?
No, I was just removing the rotten life cycle state.
All right, looks like this one is actually a good one. Looks like this has been like a staple of in general of like good Kubernetes clusters deployed. Having a conformance test running. We are doing some of this conformance tests already for vSphere. I think as part of the cloud provider vSphere testing, I think we're doing some conformance testing. It would be nice to have this also as part of Cluster API. Is there anybody that has some prior experience on running conformance? If you wanted to take a look at this, get this assigned.
I feel like this item probably should be lower priority. I mean, we could probably talk about it when Andrew's back, but I feel like we need more test coverage on like the cluster provisioning parts first. Mm-hmm. Like for example, we test some of the kubeadm overrides on the cluster config, things like that.
Gotcha. So I think this is more like something that we could use to smoke test a deployed cluster, kind of like a black box testing, really. We deploy this thing, we run Sonoboy against it.
Yeah, I mean, that might be something that I can help out with, but I agree with Andrew that I think it's probably lower priority, and I've been playing a little bit with the end-to-end tests, so that kind of fits into the area I'm looking at anyways, but it wouldn't be the first thing that I start working on. Like, we're missing cluster cuddle delete right now. That would be, there are the other things I would pick first, but I mean, I'm still happy if my name is attached to this as something I might be able to look at.
That's cool. I'm going to add you to this, but I was more thinking along the lines of, I know we talked about, on previous meetings, a lot of having prod jobs attached to tags events. So it's having post submits that run at every tag event. So something that runs every time we cover a new release. I feel like this could be something that runs at that time instead of running every single time.
Oh, that makes sense. And I do know how to do the tagged events now. I've got that figured out. I haven't done anything with it, but I know how to do it.
Yeah. So I was thinking more not something as Andrew was saying, not super high priority, nothing will block a release, in my opinion, but something we could look at like something that we run, before or after, tagging a release, making sure that everything is fine, Ideally, we should be doing this before tagging a release, but it's better than not having it, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So attached to it, I'm going to add a comment, say maybe considering lower priority for this specific issue. Whoops, wrong click. All right. Looks like these are two open PRs. I think this is something that, yeah, Andrew is open, so it needs rebase. So we'll need to wait until Andrew is back. There's actually an interesting one. I think we talked about, let's see. Yeah, thing cloning. Let me just dig it through the tree here. Okay. Okay, this is the ESXi support. I'm gonna pause here and come back later to that. Looks like this is something that might be scheduled not for this milestone. So next 031 for 10 days ago. I think this is probably, this is an interesting one. So we have Siddharth on the call. I don't think we do. So ideally is that, you know, we can potentially clone from a snapshot instead of cloning from like a bare disk. And ideally, you can have a point in time in a volume. You can clone at a specific point in time instead of like cloning the base disk altogether. I don't think it's extremely important right now. I agree. It's a pretty strong feature to have. I wonder if anyone has any comments on this one from a use case perspective, most likely. Like, is like having a way to deploy from a specific snapshot in a VMDK like a feature we want to have strongly because there's a use case that uses that. I mean, I understand like from a very like high level overview, we want to have like maybe we have a template that we snapshot at, you know, several stage of the template lives, and we just pick one specific, you know, version in time, point in time of that template. But I don't see that being like super important that we add to like a alpha stage or pre-beta stage software.
So I think cloning from the snapshot isn't really much of a requirement. I think it's a prerequisite in order to do linked cloning. But even linked cloning, I think, is also, I think at this point, nice to have. I don't think it should be a high priority.
That's a good point. Is it really a prereq for link clones?
As far as I know, a linked clone occurs off of a snapshot. But I could be wrong.
Interesting. I'm just going to add a comment here. Is this a prereq for linked clones? Because yeah, I think this is, you know, I agree. This is probably a nice to have in general, not like something we'll block a 0.1 release specifically. Oh, there it is. Support creating link clones from snapshots. Full clone. Should support the link clone. Yeah. Looks like there's still some. There's probably need to be more clear understanding of what is the use case of the other issue versus this one here. Looks like there's something has been merged already. Fixed cloning from template with snapshot and simultaneous disk expansion. Yeah, looks like there's some work already being done by Siddharth on this. That was a small change for a fix this big. Looks like this will probably need some better context coming from Siddharth and maybe Andrew Cutts. And looks like everything else has been assigned already. So I think this probably, these two features need some better context. So I'm just gonna leave them untouched. Actually, I'm gonna remove the help one here since we have Travis assigned. Looks like the backlog for 031 is pretty small, so I'm not like overly concerned by this, and I want to let Andrew Cutts bless this one before we commit to anything else. Any questions, concerns on this backlog here? Looks fine.
Can we touch base on the and sorry, maybe I missed what you said before, but the load balancer for HA, is that for 3.1?
This is actually marked for 3.1, so, and it's assigned to you. And Moshe. If you want to take a look, if you want to discuss this, I'm open. I just went through the issues that were not assigned.
Yeah. I think there's some context on some of my personal notes on this. So I will go back and either keep it there or put it to the next milestone.
I'm actually very interested to hear about this because it's something that has been bothering us for a long time. I wonder if you had any.
No, not much yet, but I'll follow up on this. Sorry, go ahead, Moshe.
I think there's actually two issues that we should have. One is support for bring your own load balancer, type HA, and then HA support with client-side load balancer, which is kind of the area that I wanted to work on. The bring your own load balancer is probably not an area that I could provide much help on, seeing as I don't have access to VMC.
I think actually bringing your own load balancer can be something that could work even if you don't have like an external load balancer. Like if I'm thinking in the context of vSphere, could be, even if I have like something, well, NSX would be something. It could be something like even an HA proxy that is deployed in a like master slave or multi-master fashion, or even something different like even a PF Sans with a bunch of VMs running carp could do some load balancing, some very basic load balancing. So I think like sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the requirement here is figuring out whether we want to build cat feed to just be like, just give me an IP of some load balancer you created, or if it needs to be a little bit more prescriptive in deploying something on top of existing VMs or something that can help with the load balancing part. Because I feel like if we go with the former, then adding support for this is super simple. We just require user input on that IP address they want to use. So I think it depends on that.
And then the user has to go and update the IP or the load balancer out of band as well, because you're not going to be able to pre-populate the load balancer with the machine set IPs unless you're using static IPs.
And maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but I'm thinking like a lot of vSphere environments they may want to use, like want to build like something like a Kubernetes HA, type of deployment. They probably have some sort of like central big iron load balancer, like an F5, like a proper appliance that runs all the load balancing duties, and it's maybe replicated as all the sort of stuff that a traditional vSphere install has, right? So it has like a big load balancer sitting in front of everything. So this could be something that you would never get to automate. in CAP-V, you will always have to have some sort of like, here's the IP you will use, and then out of band, as you were saying, Moshe, you just go and upload and update all the backend IP addresses for etcd or for the APM servers. So I feel like this should be something that we should have regardless of whatever plan is to have the automated load balancer deployment. Because I think it will still be a valid use case in many situations where you don't want to have your own load balancer deployed.
And it should be fairly simple just to add the option to specify the control plane endpoint.
Yeah, and I think even if we do what Oshie mentioned earlier, like only client side, like internal LB load balancing, without having the out of band LB support, like that could still be useful because you still get HA for like the controller manager and other things, which might be better than nothing.
So do you think we should break out this into like 2 or more separate issues?
Maybe like one of them might be just like support having multiple control plane nodes, and then the second one could be like out of band LB support. But yeah, I can follow up with Oshie after, and we can figure out a way to break this up into 2 issues, and then we'll follow up with Andrew to determine which of those are going to go into the milestone.
Sounds good. All right, let me go back and see if we missed anything else. And it looks like these 2 are 2 PRs, and there's one last issue here. I think this is, probably just trying to align with Kappa on some feature.
So this, I think, can actually be closed because it's moving to the kubeadm bootstrap provider, or to the bootstrap provider. So I don't think we should implement this unless it's been implemented already.
Yeah. Looks like it's been implemented in Flush API. Well, it's closed, so. Since Andrew Cutts is assigned to this, maybe we can just let him update this next time around.
Sure.
All right. Any other comments on the backlog here?
Nope.
All right. Let's move on to some of the a couple of the issues that we had to look at. I think we definitely wanted to discuss the ESXi support. So as far as I can see, we talked about this last time, in terms of like support cost, and we need to have CI for running this. Honestly, I don't see I see the value in having ESXi support. I was the one that proposed it initially and implemented the very first version, so I'm definitely biased on this one. But right now, the way it is implemented now, so the shift that happened after 0.2.0, I'm seeing probably less and less like the need for having this in the first place. I wonder if there are like any strong feelings around keeping ESXi support. And again, I'm maybe I'm biased because I wanted to have it, but right now with the new model, I don't see like that much value in having it, given the support cost that we have in terms of keeping this feature supported going forward.
So I think that the primary benefit for me is the feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
So on like the vCenter clusters that I'm using today, launching a VM is like maybe 2 minutes to start a VM. On ESXi, it's a couple of seconds. So being able to rapidly iterate and I think it would definitely help my development velocity, and I think it would help others as well. Just being able to run end-to-end type scenarios quickly. But that's just my 2 cents on this.
Because I think one of the other options that was potentially like thrown out there was like adding support for ESXi to vSphere.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm also quite, I think that's long-term much better.
Mm-hmm.
And I see Doug there did reply that it will be like in the short term, that you'll be able to get something out on that.
So technically, it's not like a huge body of work. vSphere does a lot of, what is needed today to support the lifecycle of a VM. Actually, it mocks the lifecycle of a VM through a container today. So you can potentially simulate the lifecycle of a VM through a container. Obviously, it wouldn't work in this specific use case here, but just to tell you that the lifecycle of a VM is entirely supported today in vSphere. But basically here will be just to hook up a real ESX host instead of having just a mock.
Yeah.
I feel like. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's definitely long term, I think, the right solution.
Because my take on this is that I'm afraid that implementing ESXi support today, we will miss out on a lot of features that we take for granted because we're targeting vCenter and not directly ESX. So in terms of like the project is targeting vCenter. It's not targeting directly ESX, right? So targeting ESX is like a second-class citizen, really, because you're targeting a platform that doesn't have all the features that the cluster API will take for granted because it supports vCenter. And I feel like having something like vSphere could be a way to, one, do not like complicate the code base. So like not having the secondary code path altogether for ESX will be beneficial because we don't have to have that. And you've probably seen I'm sure you've seen all the, trickery that goes into like cloning a VM.
Yeah.
That. So that was an interesting exercise to get there. But there's a lot of like guesswork. There's a lot of, calling APIs that were not intended to do that, to do cloning and stuff like that. So it's not optimal. It works because it works, but it's not optimal. And I feel like, getting to a point where we have something like vCSIM that can be hooked up into, one or multiple ESXi servers running locally, since vCSIM is really, very lightweight, it can run easily. It's not like anything like vCenter. Could be a good way of like having a quicker feedback loop, which I believe it's the main use case for this, right?
So maybe what we should do is just put this on hold for, let's say, a month, and then see how far Doug gets. And if he's made some good progress, then we close it. If he hits some other issues, either he doesn't have the time for it or whatever the case is, then we relook at it.
Sounds a very good plan. Let me just do that. There's actually a label for something like that. I think it's frozen. But this is a 4PR, so life cycle. Let me see. Actually, it works.
Well,
Let me just give it frozen. You can see that's
and then you'll just link it to the VC sim issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I'm happy with that.
Come on. You can do that, yeah. Go ahead. Just gonna put a comment here and see what progress can be made in supporting this use case with VCSIM.
Maybe we can also just discuss that SSH keys issue for 031, I think it is. Not sure if you guys have commented on it. But the addition of an automatic SSH key pair.
This one here?
Yeah. So I think I'm quite concerned from a security perspective. I know this is going to raise a lot of red flags for my internal InfoSec guys. So I don't know. There's an issue or a PR as well.
There's a PR as well, yeah. I'm not sure if this looks like it's a big PR though.
Yeah, I agree that by default, I don't think that we should provide like a default SSH key or generated one. I think Hui's perspective on this was to make E2E testing easier. But yeah, I'm not sure. I agree, like from a security standpoint, like if you provision a cluster, you have to give kubectl access to it. Like if you wanted to do weird SSH stuff in it, like you could always like exec to it through a pod. I don't know, but like a default SSH key sounds like bad news down the road.
In general, generating SSH keys, it's a bad idea. Like generating a secret and just consuming that secret, it's not a good idea. It's
maybe we should just like poll for like if we feel that lots of users are requesting it and there's a valid use case for it, then maybe we could add it. But for now, just hold.
So if I look at history in terms of like tools that are provisioning and managing the life cycle of VMs or anything really. If I take for example Vagrant, Vagrant used to have this insecure key that was embedded in every single VM that you would create for Vagrant, right? And then at runtime, when you deploy from that template, the insecure key will be replaced at runtime with a new secret, with a new SSH key, generated automatically while you were deploying the new template. It's better than having an unsecure SSH key that everybody knows the private key for. Yes. Is it ideal? Not so much. Actually, the preferred way of dealing with SSH keys was to create and supply your own to your Vagrant file. So Vagrant will just use your SSH key and substitute the insecure key with your key, not with the one that was generated. And that was the correct pattern for this. But I agree that there's a lot of convenience out of having something that generates a key that is generated on your machine, or in general, it's generated just for you, and have that instead of having something insecure or something that you have to provide the key for beforehand.
Maybe this is something that should be moved into cluster cattle that generates the keys and then automatically updates the SSH public keys config.
Yep, that's not a good point. Which is actually essentially what happens in Vagrant too. Vagrant has a command line tool that does that for you. And it's not part of the provider itself. It's part of the tool. It's the equivalent of having cluster cuddle here creating the SSH key pair for you. I'm just going to add a comment here and see if should the generation of pair be delegated to cluster cuddle. Yeah, this one is it's interesting. So this is the PR. I think we had an issue for this. Let me just link to my comment here. This is a Tony feature. I mean, there's no good answer for this one. I think I'm not like happy either way. There's there's no good way to answer this one. I think it's not the job of the provider itself to generate that key. Also because this will and right now cluster cuddle, it's provider specific, but technically whatever replaces cluster cuddle at some point, or cluster cuddle itself, that would work across provider. I feel like that's the right place where the key generation should happen, and not on the provider side, and mandate and delegate like the key generation to every provider, because that way you can potentially create a drift in how these keys are generated. And
what is the actual requirement for having these SSH keys?
To always have SSH access available.
To me, it's almost something that should be done at the image layer. So like I know internally we bake SSH keys into an image and then use that image.
Which is fair, but in general, like if you want to have a single template for multiple users that are not necessarily sharing the same credentials.
So what we actually do is we create user accounts with every user's SSH key into the template itself.
Yeah, no, I get that. What I'm saying is that if you have one template with all the SSH keys inside, right? And you use that template to create all the nodes, right? So you have access directly because you have the SSH key baked into the image. But if you have one template and you have two different teams that are not sharing credentials, so they're not sharing access, and you only have one template because you want to maintain only one template, then you have to inject credentials at runtime. and this will be the place where you inject credentials. So ideally, you will not let the cluster cuddle or the provider generate those SSH keys for you. You would have to provide those keys yourself and have them at a runtime. In this case, if you don't provide those SSH keys, it will generate them for you, so you have SSH access regardless if you provided SSH keys or not. Does that make any sense? Yeah.
Yep.
So the use case is valid. It's the way it's implemented that it's I think it needs some debate. But I don't want to bike shed too much on this. Any comments on this? I feel like there's a lot of interesting food for thought here. So, all right, Andy has replied on my comment, pending the outcome. Okay. Which is fair. So cluster call or whatever tool instantiate the trigger creation of a cluster. In other words, not letting the provider create those keys. All right, I think we bike shed enough on this. Anything else? Anything else people want to bring up? We're 40 minutes in, we can wrap it up earlier today. People want, or if you guys have anything you want to discuss, feel free. We're gonna run the countdown. And once, twice, 3 times. All right, folks, it's a wrap. See you
Cheers.
in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Bye,
See you.
folks.
Bye.